Good Good afternoon, everyone. This is Preston James, and I want to welcome all of you to this event this evening. I am the CEO and co-founder of DivInc, and really excited this evening to have you all join us to talk about how we can generate equity through corporate partnerships. I'm really this obviously is a major topic in business and entrepreneurship. But I wanted to take a moment just to share a little bit about DivInc and what we do and why we're here and why we're hosting this. So very quickly, DivInc is a tech startup ecosystem builder. We were founded in 2016 based in Austin, Texas. And, essentially our core mission is to generate equity through entrepreneurship. And for us, the way we're doing that is essentially identifying, we identify the key issues around equitable entrepreneurship. And those really, basically stem from really one word, and that one word is access, right? And there's a lack of access to the education, best practices, know-how, lack of access to the human and social capital networks, meaning the mentors, meaning the talent pools, meaning, advisors and serial entrepreneurs that are in the ecosystem. And then last but not least, it's also the lack of access to financial capital. And so for DivInc, we were born out of essentially addressing and removing those barriers in the ecosystem, specifically for underrepresented founders. And so through our core program, which is a tech startup accelerator, we have helped now it's over 70 companies over the last 4.5-5 years launch or accelerate their businesses in the state of Texas. And we're very proud of that fact that we continue to do that. In addition to that, we've evolved and we've added our alumni program where we continue to support our entrepreneurs 18 months to 2 years after they've completed their accelerated program. And then also, thirdly, we have what we call our Startup Sisters, which is a women of color entrepreneurship initiative focusing on the unique challenges that women of color actually face in the entrepreneur ecosystem today. And so our programming, our workshops and events are geared towards helping remove those barriers and helping the women not only overcome those challenges, but really help them thrive in that environment. And last but not least, we also have what we call a Social Justice Innovation Accelerator program, which we launched last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the racial reckoning that we've all been part of over the last 18 months. And so with the Social Justice Innovation Program, our focus is to bring activism and innovation together to essentially adopt solutions that eradicate institutional racism and bias in our society. So we have as I mentioned, a ecosystem builder where we are really serving and empowering underrepresented entrepreneurs to build highly successful growth businesses in our communities that we serve. And most recently, we've actually, being in Austin for the last 4.5 years, we recently expanded into the city of Houston. So we are actually right now have our first cohort of 10 companies in our accelerator program in Houston. So super excited about that. Super excited to be here this evening with all of you. And so without further ado, you know about DivInc, and now I want to, really introduce some of our great partners that we have between Austin and Houston, and really have a authentic dialogue about how we drive equity in entrepreneurship. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to the managing director for our Houston market, Ashley DeWalt. So Ashley, take it away, my man.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's a pleasure to be here, and looking forward to being able to have these awesome panelists. Have this very candid conversation today, and hopefully everyone to be able to take some valuable things and some insight. And also put some things on your mind as far as ways that we can continue to work together, collaborate to really drive change in our ecosystem. Not just in Houston and Austin, but beyond, across the country. And so I really want to take a second to just say thank you for your time today. And just some house cleaning things. Be sure to drop any questions. There's a tab that you can definitely drop questions in, and we will be able to answer those questions, at the end of our discussion. And we'll go from there. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists at this time. So we have, we have Blair Guru, who is the managing director at the Mercury Fund. And we also have Stephen Shaw, who is a community engagement director at Verizon. And we also have Yvette Ruiz, who is a vice president of community engagement at JP Morgan Chase. And so thank y'all for the time, and look forward to kicking this thing off. And so, without further ado, I want to jump in and really just, ask each of you, can you share with our audience a little bit about your background, in corporate, just kind of tell your story briefly, so then that way everyone can really have a little bit better insight into your background. And anyone,
I was going to say ladies first, so I'll go ahead being the representative. Hi, everybody. My name is Yvette Ruiz. I am the Community Engagement and Market Strategy Manager for JP Morgan Chase. I am based in Austin, Texas, and have been a very early supporter of Div Inc.'s work here in Austin. And I'm so pleased to say that we had a small hand in supporting them in their expansion to Houston. So we're grateful for the organization and all the work that you do. A huge function of the work that I lead at JP Morgan Chase is really localizing a racial equity agenda with smaller grassroots nonprofit organizations that are focused specifically on economic and financial justice. So a lot of that looks like making sure that what we're doing from a products and services side is culturally relevant and competent and meets the consumer where they are. But beyond that, what are the organizations, who are the organizations that are doing really good work that we can prop up and scale out? More to come, but that's a little bit about who I am. And I will pass it over to Stephen.
Thanks, Yvette. I appreciate that. Good evening. My name is Stephen Shaw. I'm the Community Engagement Director at Verizon, and I'm responsible for overseeing our community engagement, or our CSR work, in both the Chicago and the Milwaukee markets. But in my role, I work closely with our national CSR team in implementing what we call Citizen Verizon. So Citizen Verizon is Verizon's global responsible business plan for economic, environmental, and social advancement. We believe everyone can be a citizen, and all citizens then have the responsibility of moving our society forward. So in Chicago, we developed an organization called Tech Rise, and it is we call ourselves, we're a sister to Div Inc. Matter of fact, we just launched about a month before. And so in working with our national CSR team as part of this Citizen Verizon, the part that looks at, so our three tenets are digital inclusion, climate protection, and human prosperity. And as part of human prosperity, we look at not just traditional workforce, but how can we accelerate underrepresented, and really we're represented, but really underfunded entrepreneurs, and how can we support small business development? And so the work that we built here in Chicago with Tech Rise and the work that we're supporting in Houston and with Div Inc., that's part of our human prosperity portfolio. And we're happy to be a sponsor and to be a part of this event tonight. And so now I guess I will kick it over to Blair now.
All right. Thanks for the stick. Appreciate that. So I'm Blair Guru, co-founder and managing director of Mercury Fund. And so I think I'm the newest partner. My firm's the newest partner at Div Inc., and we're super excited, and we'll talk more about that later. But my role is we invest throughout the middle of the country in early stage entrepreneurs. And we've been doing that for close to 20 years. And in doing this, we've seen how a lot of secondary and tertiary markets grow and how they expand. And a lot of these markets take their cues from Silicon Valley and Boston, where those cues of how you grow an entrepreneurial ecosystem, they tend to leave the underrepresented behind. And so about 5 years ago, when we saw that our deal flow was very homogeneous and we weren't seeing diverse deal flow like we wanted, we weren't seeing women-led businesses, we weren't seeing Black and Hispanic-led businesses, we got very deliberate about opening our aperture, about building partnerships with organizations, accelerators, VC firms, corporates that were aggregators of great opportunities, because we think the best opportunities are yet to come. We've always focused on the underrepresented entrepreneur in the middle of the country. But while that used to be everyone in the past, now we're finding that it's really the underestimated. And since doing that, our deal flow for the underestimated, the actual investments that we've made has increased by 500%. 25% of our deals over the last 4 years have been around these demographics. And these are some of the best investments in our portfolio. So from our perspective, the corporate partnering is from a venture perspective. But, Div Inc. is a great partner for us and what we can do to help Houston really become the tech ecosystem that it needs to be. And what's interesting and exciting is Houston's still in the early innings. So we have the ability to get it right. We don't have to go back and course correct. So super excited to partner with Preston, Ashley, and the entire team.
Hey, Blair, thank you. And that, for us, I think, that's really important. I mean, this partnership that we have with you guys with Mercury that we recently announced today, along with Verizon, JP Morgan, I mean, that's huge in our efforts here in Houston. And so, just kind of piggyback off some of the reasons as far as, your why, Steve and Yvette, I'm curious to ask you both, what's your why? Why do you think that it's important for, corporations to be able to, get involved in a community with, organizations like a Div Inc. or, I'm just using as an example, why do you think that is so important? Because I think that for our audience, we have folks that are on, that are in academia. We have, folks that are in this virtual crowd that are in corporate. And so, can you guys just kind of share, a little bit more about that why?
Sure. So I'll take the first pass and then pass it over to Stephen. But so there's no secret. Small businesses are the backbone of America, right? And small businesses can be defined by a lot of different ways. But tech specifically in Texas is proven to show that if you have an idea, a startup, and then kind of growing the business from there can be harder for some than others. And I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley from an immigrant family, and I understand how hard it is to start a business from nothing with a whole lot of passion and not a whole lot of business acumen. And so in the corporate world, especially when you're a financial institution like JP Morgan Chase that has a whole division focused on business banking and tech banking, we want to make sure that the products and services that we are providing from a business perspective are equitable. And for folks who are a little further upstream, who may not have access or may not have the credit worthiness and all of that, how are we partnering with organizations that can help build those businesses, provide that really critical technical assistance piece where passion is there, but business acumen might be a little bit lacking, like a Div Inc. can step in, help the organization really build out a plan. And that is just one way our corporate responsibility efforts can our dollars can be leveraged so much further when we know we're making meaningful investments into organizations that are then in turn helping our tech startups and our business owners really find that success and find that platform for really astronomical growth.
And Yvette, building on that, so my why is I started my career as a business analyst in the as a strategy and operations analyst at Deloitte Consulting. So I started out as a management consultant. I'm in corporate now, and I've worked at another small boutique management consulting firm. But between those experiences, I've worked in government at 3 levels. And so I have a perspective that no one sector can adequately address the issues that our society is facing. So I come to my work with a multi-sector perspective and a multi-sector collaboration kind of methodology. And so when I was in government, we worked with nonprofits and we worked with corporations. Now that I'm back on the corporate side, a lot of the work that I do is with nonprofits, but to support some of our municipal and our policy efforts. And so I am very much focused on how can we bring the resources of different sectors together to solve some of these problems, just like Yvette talked about, whether it's the racial wealth gap, whether it's digital inequality, and all of these issues are interconnected. So that's my why. And focusing on, as part of human prosperity, looking at how we can accelerate these businesses that have been where there have always been great ideas, but just not the capital and the other resources to really propel them to growth. And so that's why I'm really excited about the work that Div Inc. is doing. And I think this is a model that can be, can be built and can be spread across the country.
No, that's awesome. And Blair, did you have any other, things that you want to throw in there, I guess, from your perspective as being in venture, outside of what you shared a little bit earlier?
Yeah, we've been working on a number of initiatives in Houston to try to open the aperture for underrepresented entrepreneurs. One of the things, Stephen touched on is all around access, but the other thing too, like what I do as a venture capitalist, right? It's kind of opaque. It's a difficult job to find, and it's not necessarily a hard job to understand once somebody walks you through it, right? Ashley, you've been kind of officing here for about a couple of months now while the ION's getting ready, for your all's arrival, which we're super excited about. But when you've asked me questions of saying, hey, I heard you guys talk about this, or you heard you talk about this, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, 5-minute explanation. You're like, got it. And you move forward, right? Like, how many gotcha moments do we have to multiply out there to then level the playing field of just baseline knowledge, right? Because a lot of a startup isn't physics. You don't have to go to school to pick these things up, but you do need to have mentorship and you do need to have advice. And I think you need to have people that kind of slow down and care about it. And I think a lot of people think about what are the resources the underrepresented needs? And they think a lot of it's capital. But I think there's plenty of capital. I think there's lots of high net worth investors, lots of family offices, lots of corporates that would put the capital to work. But if you don't pair that capital up with mentorship, right, people that can give you the advice at the right time and open those right doors, then the capital just sits in a bank. And so I think what Div Inc. does is so key to that first layer of support, that pre-seed seed stage. Because like once you just give a little knowledge and kind of push it forward, then the rest of the ecosystem kind of take flight. So it's, to me, we do it because there's a flywheel effect here, right? The amount of time we put in will not only lead to great investment opportunities for us, but will just make these communities better. And again, I think more people that see that, they'll want a piece of it, right? They'll want to participate. They'll want to see, wow, I can give 5 minutes and I'm going to get 50 in return, right? So.
No,
Ashley, can I build on something that Blair said? Because I think it's really important that which is so great that the venture community is here at the table. And I know that Div Inc. is very intentional about bringing VCs to the table, just like we are at TechRise in Chicago. And it's yes, it is from a funding standpoint, because we've probably all seen the statistics that say Black and Latinx founders get less than 2% of the total market for VC funding. So yes, there is a funding component, but it's also important to have VCs at the table just for pattern recognition. So there are so many innovations that have resided in Black and Latinx communities that have just gone unrecognized. Or if Black or Latinx founders are able to make it to the table to pitch to a VC, the ideas are sometimes foreign, whereas a funder might say, well, that's, isn't this problem already solved? When in reality, there's a huge market. And so it's great to see VCs at the table because, yes, they can bring funding, but they can also bring perspective and bring other resources to tackle this. And Blair said it best, there's a gap. Yes, there's a capital gap. There's a financial capital gap. There's also a human capital gap. And so having having these different players at the table is really key.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And I think that, when you talk about the human capital, I think that is, so valuable. Like with Blair and his team at Mercury, I mean, they're able to, provide that mentorship to those founders, that's coming through our cohort. And so, I mean, that's priceless. That's priceless outside of just, capital. And so, that is that's great, Stephen. I wanted you to kind of share, because I know you mentioned the Tech Rise, but for like some of our audience members who might not know that initiative that you guys have going on in Chicago, can you kind of elaborate on that? Just kind of, let our audience know what's that, what you guys have going on in Chicago, because I think there's a huge opportunity for us to replicate that in Houston.
Well, so Preston and I, we met, Preston, I don't know. It's at the beginning of the year. So we've already started looking at ways that we can collaborate, because the model that Divvying has is so powerful and is doing such good work. But as I stated during my introduction, Verizon has a focus as part of its human prosperity pillar, has a focus on not just traditional workforce, but on entrepreneurship, specifically as a technology company, tech entrepreneurship, as well as small business development. So we kicked this effort off in Chicago by bringing together an organization called P33, which is a tech convener that is really charged with building Chicago into the tech ecosystem. That we have all the parts. We just need someone to bring that together. So we worked with P33 as well as a pretty nationally acclaimed accelerator called 1871. So part of our role as Verizon was really playing the network role to bring together P33, bringing together 1871. 1871 already has award-winning accelerator programs, and they were in the process of developing what they call the Black Tech Accelerator to complement their women-focused and their Latinx-focused accelerator. P33 was looking at how can we make tech not only more accessible, but make innovation more inclusive. And so when you take these two organizations and Verizon together, along with some other corporate partners who have come on and become great partners, that's how, that is what Tech Rise is. And so the way we're deploying our capital is through, we're multiple accelerators that are part of the program, starting with 1871, and we have a series of pitch competitions. Actually, we're kicking that off this Friday. And so with the pitch competitions, there will always be some permutation of Black and or Latinx founders with technology or tech-enabled innovations. And the winners of those pitch competitions will receive a minimum $10,000 of non-diluted grant funding. And this is to take the place of what is normally called like the friends and family round of funding. Blair talked about it earlier. There are a number of steps before you get to your traditional kind of VC Series A. And so we want to play the role of getting a lot of these entrepreneurs and their ideas, whether they're at a seed stage or whether they've got MVP. Some might have even experienced a little bit of revenue. But wherever they are on this early stage of the journey, we want to provide some non-dilutive funding. We want to provide the accelerator programming, and we want to provide a sense of networking. So not only can the entrepreneurs know each other, VCs have access to them, other kind of fractional talent. So entrepreneurs might need legal assistance. They might need some marketing help. So we want to bring all these resources together to really help our entrepreneurs grow their tech ventures.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Yvette, so you can kind of share some of the things, from a perspective of, what JP Morgan Chase is doing, has done recently, because I think that that's so critical. Like the things that Stephen has mentioned is very innovative. And, we talk about just examples of, how corporate partnerships can work, where they really played that role as like a networker. That was, to me, that's something that's very innovative and thinking outside the box. And so, for our audience, can you kind of elaborate as well on some of the things that JP Morgan Chase is doing? And then I'm going to pass it off to Blair.
Yeah, so there's a couple of really interesting things that we're doing from a business and a startup perspective. So first, I'll lead with making critical investments in accelerator programs that have proven success is just the first start in making sure that we are providing the ecosystem some support so that it can be successful. The other part of this is we are not just going to cut a check and then run, right? So a big part of our successful partnership with Diving, to be totally candid, has been, Preston and the team always coming back to our team with an update with here's what's great, here's what we're working on, here's what we're looking at in the next 6 months, the next 12 months. I'll never forget the first time that we had a conversation with Preston. It was, we're thinking about expansion outside of Austin once we've got our sea legs from here. What do you think? And I said, well, once we're ready for that, let's have a conversation so I can introduce you to my colleagues around the state, right? And so these partnerships don't happen overnight. If you are in philanthropy, if you're on our side of the house, I would strongly suggest building a relationship, right? Philanthropy is relationships. And for us, having that trust with Preston and his team has really allowed for some really interesting conversations around what JP Morgan Chase can do and is doing, and then what we're not and where we really should be. As we think about this larger expansion, it's really interesting to think through, okay, so we've made the initial investment. We're opening up the social network a little bit. How can we open up the social network for the businesses themselves? What's the mentorship part here? What is the access to capital part? But then beyond that, what is the social networking part? The JP Morgan Chase Institute, which is an in-house institute that we use to take anonymized data and make inferences on what is happening on local communities. And one of the things that the Institute has found, that specifically with Black and Brown business owners, this includes the tech startup space, is that access to capital is a barrier. It's not the only barrier, and it's not the biggest barrier. There are so many other levers that are really important for businesses to pull on to be able to reach that big financial success. And again, just in light of what we are doing, the firm has recently, obviously we've got bankers out of the branches and our corporate offices and all of that. That's very typical. What is atypical for a financial institution is that in Houston, we have a senior small business consultant. We have someone with consultant expertise who can talk to business owners regardless of their relationship with Chase. You don't have to be a client. You don't have to have a credit card or a debit card with us. You don't have to have a car loan, absolutely nothing. You can walk in and talk to Mr. Robert Hines about what your idea is. And he will sit and mentor and consult with you as part of his day job. And you can walk away from the conversation once having learned everything you need, or come back to him for other ideas and questions. This creation of the job in Houston is also being replicated in other markets. But what I think is really important here is we are responding to the feedback that the community gave us. Hey, you're great. You're showing up. You've got products and services, but we really need advice. Can you help us with that? And we're trying to deliver. And I'm just so glad that we have this resource in Houston.
No, that's fantastic. And you couldn't have picked a better person than Robert Hines.
I know, he's the best.
He's the man. He's the man. So Blair, so I know you mentioned earlier in the conversation about some of the things that you guys are doing with us. And of course, there was a recent announcement early today. So I wanted you to kind of share, what this unprecedented partnership looks like, because we believe that this is something that can almost be a blueprint for future partnerships, because it is very innovative. And I hate to always, use that word innovative, but these are things that, you, Steve, and Yvette, what you guys are doing, it truly is innovative. And so wanted you to kind of, speak on that a little bit more. And then before I let you do that, please be sure, folks, to drop in those questions in the Q&A. I do see some popping up, but I promise we'll get to those as soon as we're done. So just want to remind everyone. Blair, take it away.
Yeah, you bet, Ash. So, there's a number of initiatives that we've been working on in Houston. It really kind of started with my partner, Heath Butler, and his partners who had launched the Urban Capital Network. And the Urban Capital Network is aggregating individuals of wealth from underrepresented communities who don't have access to venture funds or direct investments in startup deals. And so these are individuals who don't have enough wealth to be managed by a Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley. And so they can't, again, get access. And so we're like, hey, are there ways to diversify the limited partner pool within our funds where it can be a win-win, educating individuals along the way so they can make those core investments into those huge returners and then invest back in the community. But that's kind of at the high level, right? We're also working kind of side by side with the city of Houston and HX on a really great initiative that'll be announced in the next couple of months. But that initiative really opened our eyes to the fact that you really need to meet entrepreneurs that are in corporate America or are working a day job or have that idea, just like you were talking about, Yvette. And so how could we empower that to see more deals, to meet more entrepreneurs? And so, we first heard of Div Inc. through Josh Barrett Capital Factory. And about the same time, my friend Gabby Rowe, who I got to work with at Station and Ion. And I think Gabby was one of the key people that brought you to town, Preston. I remember her talking about you guys. And then when Heath joined us, he was talking about you guys. And so, we kind of had in the back of our mind, okay, what can we do? And so when we heard about you guys doing a cohort here, right, we were like, well, how can they do 10 cohorts, right? How can they take 10 people a year, but how can they do 100, right? Just like you were talking about, Yvette, because so many people need advice. And so the partnership we have, we sat down with Preston and Ashley and said, hey, what can we do together? Go away and give us your laundry list, right? What's your dream opportunity that you would do? Because they had partnered in Austin as well with really great funds, like our friends over at Next Coast that do just such great work with entrepreneurs. But here in Houston, we don't have the amount of venture-ready deals that Austin does. And so I think the needs in Houston are a little bit different than Austin. So what they came back with was essentially, hey, look, we want you guys interfacing at office hours. We want, essentially like pull up the blinds on Mercury, bring as many of these entrepreneurs in as possible, let them see the office space, let them interface with everyone. And so we're literally having our entire organization do office hours, from our marketing director to our finance director to our finance manager, trying to pair them up, right? Just trying to have everybody kind of dive in. And then the next thing was, okay, well, how do we make this bigger? Preston had an ask, right? And he's like, well, look, Verizon and JP Morgan and Rice and the Ion, they helped bring us here and launch us, but we probably need to raise $3 million in order to take this to the next level. Not only to hire more people, right? Like Ashley needs a squad, right? That's going to get after it. He can't be the one-man band, and he's not with his Austin team, but it takes a lot of people. But also because you need those investments, like Stephen talked about, the good work that they're doing in Chicago. We need to put capital beside these entrepreneurs. Otherwise, they can't not only not quit their day job, they can't put the time in that's needed to get to that next step. So we decided that we as a firm, through our management company, so Personal Money, we've made a commitment to 10% of their $3 million capital campaign over 3 years. And we're going to go out and help them raise the rest through corporate partners and other nonprofits in town. And, kind of the clarion call was put out there, I think, by, these two fine organizations of how corporates should manifest and how they should give back to the communities, right? Do right, make money by doing good. So we want to kind of put that out there for the venture community. There's so many VCs coming to Houston as one of the #1 cities in the U.S. to not have its tech renaissance. So as they're coming into town, we want to point them in this direction and say, look, right, we think Houston's strength is its diversity. And I think Houston may have been focused, not in the wrong area, but in an area that every other city focuses on, which is the natural order of entrepreneurs who understand, get capital, move through the system. And everyone's wondering, why hasn't Houston gotten it right yet? Well, maybe we haven't put enough resources with the right communities. And so our bet is that Houston's tech emergence will come from the underrepresented. So we're all in. So this is, again, I see Preston smiling, kind of nodding his head, but this is going to be a lot of fun. We hope other people will help join us, along with, JP Morgan and Verizon and others that have already put the capital to work. But also, it's not just money, right? It's you got to do the heavy lift. You got to mentor. You got to advise, right? If Preston and Ashley raised $10 million without 50 people to work with the companies, it means absolutely nothing. So that's part of our job as well.
No, that's awesome, Preston. And I know you were shaking your head and nodding. So I'm sure you want to add something to that. So go ahead.
Man, I'm just sitting here. I don't have, I just say this, I'm just proud, right? And blessed at the same time, right? To have, you hear these partners of ours, on this panel. And this is not just about DeVink, right? I mean, this is talking about what is possible, what it is that we can do together. And I just feel, proud and blessed at the same time that we've been able to find and connect with partners like the three that you see here on this panel. You talk about, there is funding, right? But, you can't just chase it just for the funding, right? It's got to be the engagement. It's got to be the resources. It's got to be, we're all passionate about, making change. And because of that, we have this common synergy to go and try, right? And so if nothing else, we can say that we've tried, we've done, and we've tried, and we've pushed and made some inroads together. Right. And I think the point's been made that, no one entity on this panel, JP Morgan, with all the resources that it has, Verizon, amazing technologies and people, Mercury Fund, a lot of financial capital, but not one entity can do it alone. Right. And so the beautiful thing that, I'm sharing, with the audience is that whether it's entrepreneurship in tech, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's criminal justice or whatever it may be, to find those synergies with corporate partners and try to go, make a change in terms of, equity, whether, whatever it may be, because I think people are still beginning to realize, like I said, no one entity can do it alone, but all of these resources together and with the understanding of what problems we're trying to tackle, a clearer understanding. Because I think a year ago, 2 years ago, not everyone had this level of understanding of what was really needed to create equity in entrepreneurship or to create a more equitable community engagement in terms of entrepreneurship. I don't think everyone understood totally, right? But now I think the alignment is there, and then people are saying, "Well, we have these resources. These are the resources." DeVink is asking for what we see is needed to support underrepresented entrepreneurs, and folks are saying, "Well, we can do this and we can do that," and here you are. You see. Three amazing partners that are committed and very intentional, and they're making really big moves. These are bold moves, right? That each of these companies have made. This is not, soft stepping up in here, right? I mean, Stephen, we hard throwing, right? We hard throwing up in here. So, and that's key, right? And so, DeVink is just thrilled to be hard throwing with everybody else too. So it's beautiful.
Hey, Preston.
That's it for me. I want to hear from you.
Hey, let me add one more thing, because, Ashley, you're talking about what makes a good partnership, right? Well, it's a two-way street. And so, like, some of the expectations Mercury has, we've started to put diversity riders in all our term sheets, right? Challenging our entrepreneurs to hire with an inclusionary mindset, put their boards together with an inclusionary mindset, and to bring funding in with the same thing. But then again, the challenge as a venture fund is when our entrepreneurs come back and say, hey, we are looking for individuals of color to add to our boards that have these types of skill sets, we may not have that network, right? And so we can lean in on Div Inc. and its network to find those individuals that are kind of board ready or management team ready to kind of slot in. So there's so many ways, because we're learning every day, right, that we can work together to do these things. And so it's a two-way street, right? And I think it's a true partnership, right? It's not just a check writer or somebody coming in and mentoring. I mean, it's kind of both ways. And I think that's how you win in a partnership, where it doesn't just happen and you do a press release and you walk away and everyone's like, checkbox. No, that's not a winner.
And Blair, I think so often, and I can imagine if that has seen, not just seen, but experienced this, when corporations are involved, people, their eyes get big, they can see dollar signs. It's like, they can write me a check, they can provide funding. Funding is absolutely, it is necessary and it's important. But in many cases, with organizations like Verizon and like Chase, funding is just the tip of the spear. Corporations have convening power. Corporations have other resources. If you're a place like Verizon, we have our own innovation and technology labs. So we can expose partners to leading edge technology and give them opportunities to tinker with their innovations in a once we get back off of post-COVID environment, in a high-speed millimeter wave 5G lab environment. We can bring other resources to the table. So there's so much that goes into partnership that I want, and I say this when I'm talking to folks in local markets, if I'm on a national panel like this, don't limit your sites to corporate partnership as just getting a check. A mentor said to me, one of the said, if you're looking for money, ask for advice, because people are always willing to give you advice, and many times good advice can lead towards other things. And so I think that the role that corporations can play within partnership development is so vast. I want to make sure people aren't limiting their sites. Like what Yvette talked about, having a consultant who is not even married just to Chase customers, that's huge. And so those are the types of other resources that corporations can bring to the table.
Hey, Preston, I think you're on mute.
So Blair, I've got a question. So one, I think the work that you are doing, the visibility that you're providing into how you're making these big bets and changes is really interesting. So at JP Morgan, we announced a $30 billion commitment to racial equity from the business side, right? So this is not a philanthropy play. A very small amount of that is actually philanthropy. Most of the money is changing our business as usual, specifically within homeownership, workforce, and business ownership, small business, right? Those are the levers that we feel that we are uniquely positioned to affect, right? So can go into that a little bit more, but I would love to learn. I mean, again, the VC world is a little bit more opaque. So what are these conversations that you're having with your partners? How are you able to make these Herculean shifts in really building in diversity, equity, and inclusion in what is traditionally known as a very white field?
Yeah, well, first off, when you talk about that number from JP Morgan Chase, to quote Preston, right, the bold move, right, but not surprising, from Jamie Dimon and the team there. It's awesome, right? Just again and again, you guys step up. We have not had hard conversations, right? A lot of corporations, a lot of organizations said, man, we've had to have a really hard conversation. What we ended up doing 3.5 years ago is after we opened the aperture on deal flow and knew that we had to find better resources for deals in order to have a more diverse deal set, we went and did a core values assessment with a group in town called Deitzer. So they walked us through understanding what Mercury's core values were and also what behavioral competencies were that make people great here at Mercury, right, for people in certain areas. And what we found were kind of 5 core things. Some of them you would imagine you could do, right? Intellectual curiosity, passion about entrepreneurship. But one that came out that was number 3 was intentional inclusivity. And so we always talk about Mercurians as being inclusive to a fault. And when we started discovering that, we started looking at what we were doing. And it was less about, hey, we need to go make a difference. It's we were a difference, right? And so how do we just extend from that? So we sat down with a number of our newer partners. And one of the things we knew we had to do too is we needed more of an inclusive mindset in the decision makers. Specifically, we had, just males right at the partner level. And so, we were very deliberate about who we promoted and how we brought in because we needed more of inclusive understanding, but also like you talked about before, that, and I think it was you specifically, the types of deals, right, that the underestimated have, a lot of those markets, they're as opaque as venture capital, right? Unless you understand them, you just aren't going to kind of dive in. We just did a great deal. The founder and CEO, Brittany Winters, and her marketplace called Upgrade. And it's for wigs and hair extensions for women of color. And this is a deal that none of us had any context of at Mercury until we had women and we had, Black men and women at the table saying, hey, actually, that's an $8 billion market. We think that's a pretty interesting bet. And here's what you need to be looking for. It's a little bit different than the normal bet you would make, right? Now, when some of my LPs heard about that deal, they were like, what? And, right? When Brittany does her thing, they won't be saying what, right? They'll be going all the way to the bank, right? Cashing their checks. And so, again, it's in everything we do, but we like to say we haven't hired for diversity. We've hired for the inclusive mindset. Because the last 8 people that we've hired over the last 3 to 4 years, they've all had that inclusive mindset in everything that they do. And we just allow the other behavioral competencies and their experience to fall where it may. And voila, we have a diverse team. And we weren't going out trying to hire, X, Y, or Z. It was all about behavioral competencies. And I've heard of other corporations doing that, larger corporations, right, where they can be very purposeful about it. But that's been the number one game changer in our organization. And it actually bleeds over into our investments and our teams. Our teams that we invest in see us acting this way. And so people feel like they can stand up and they can do the right thing. And so it's just been great watching that kind of repeat out.
That's some great insight. And I want Preston, you're gonna add something else?
No, I was going to say you got a couple of questions that popped up in the Q&A. We might want to jump on a couple of those.
Sure. So let me jump on that now. I'll go to the one that was 23 minutes ago from Kevin. So Kevin asked, in regards to human capital, I believe HBCUs have untapped talent and given their locations a lot of potential. In what ways do you think HBCUs can create tech talent pipelines? So anyone, take it away.
So I might kick us off here just because we've got a really great example in a partnership with Prairie View A&M University, just outside of Houston or in Houston. So JP Morgan Chase, we are often considered a financial institution because we are, but Jamie Dimon often calls us one of the largest tech companies in the world because we hire so many engineers for our products and services and the cybersecurity, so on and so forth. We actually have more engineers than we do have bankers. And engineers, using a broad sense of the word, a lot of folks within that are working on tech solutions for in-house and out-of-house. When we realized that we had large operational hubs like we do in Houston, and we wanted to partner very intentionally with institutions that we haven't traditionally partnered with, the idea of really being very specific with HBCU partnerships came up. And I'm so happy. We've got a great relationship with Prairie View A&M University. We hire very specifically from the tech schools, and really work to mentor and bring in full-time, gainfully employed HBCU graduates, because we feel it's really important that we're not only drawing from universities that may be closer to downtown or so on and so forth. We really wanted to be intentional in our hiring and recruitment. And this pilot that we did in Houston has actually been replicated in markets across the United States and has been wildly successful in terms of a workforce development pipeline for us. Everyone talks about a job. Everyone talks about a good job. And what does a good job mean, right? A fair wage, a high wage, insurance, access to transportation, to the location, so on and so forth. And where we have major hubs, I'm pleased that we can be considered a good employer who offer good jobs for those that want to work with us. So it's a great question. We really love our partnership with Prairie View.
And I will add that as a proud HBCU graduate, I can, of course, I have to shout out my alma mater, Morehouse College. We have just, untold pipelines of talent coming out of, and of course, it's not just Morehouse, Spelman, Howard. You've already mentioned Prairie View, North Carolina A&T. I mean, the list goes on. But the thing that excites me is that before, a few years ago, we thought, well, we have to go out and get a good job working, and a good job was considered working for someone else. Again, there have always been wonderful ideas. There have always been great innovations, but there was no real, as one of my partners here in Chicago says, there was really no door to explore those. And so we didn't know of, there wasn't a Div Inc., there wasn't a Tech Rise. And so what we're hoping is that partnerships, whether it's a partnership or whether it's just some very intentional communication with organizations like our historically Black colleges and universities, saying now there is a specific venue, that there is a door you can go through that will not only provide mentorship, it can provide the support and the human capital, it can provide the opportunity for that upfront, and I stress non-dilutive cash, so you can actually get to Blair and get to some of his colleagues for some of the larger funding amounts. But organizations like this are important just to, in many cases, give life to some of the ideas that just lay dormant. So I cannot underemphasize how important Div Inc. is, and why we must publicize it to make sure that people know that there is this resource out there to make, in some cases, turn dreams into reality.
So let me throw a little something up in here, because I'm in the same bloodline as Stephen. I am HBCU. I am Howard University. I am also Alpha Phi Alpha, like Stephen as well. That's not why we were on the panel together, but we just have that connection. I'm just saying, I'm just saying. But obviously, a lot of love for HBCUs. We all know the tremendous talent that exists on these campuses, and what's kind of weird to me is that the projections across the United States in terms of jobs in the next 10 years, that there will be like an 8 million person gap, right, in terms of unfilled positions, right? And here we are in the United States trying to oppress certain groups from getting jobs and getting compensation and equity with women and so on and so forth. And just because we say more inclusive does not mean that people are necessarily being displaced, right? It's like we're making it more inclusive so we can tap into a broader pool of talent. as a result of tapping into a broader pool of talent, what we're able to do is create even better innovation, better creativity, better production as a result of all of that. And so, we must continue to find ways to unleash. And I think you'll find a lot of maybe some of the challenges that exist at HBCUs in terms of connecting to certain networks and pools or whatever. We just need to blow those doors open and create the access for these talent pools to gain access to certain markets and opportunities, because that's really what it comes down to, is getting access to those opportunities. So in that sense, with DivInc, and Lord knows I've talked to my peers and my team members, is that there is a vision, there is a dream that somehow that we can connect this entrepreneurship pipeline out of HBCUs that will basically continue to flourish into the startup and entrepreneur ecosystem. Having gone to Howard, and I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have come out of there. Some of you may or may not know or know. I can't remember Rodney's name right now, but he founded Listener, and Listener received investment from Intel, at least 10, maybe 20 million from Intel to go build his technology. And Rodney's a major leader in the Midwestern region, but well known throughout the United States and globally for his platform and Listener. And there's so many, many others that are out there. So we need to unleash that pipeline. I know DivInc, we will start to leverage sort of like a pre-accelerated program that will tap into that. But I have many, many peers that are beginning to have programs, and I wish I could remember the names of the programs, but I can't right now. But as soon as I get an opportunity, I'll drop it in there. But there are programs that are geared towards HBCUs in entrepreneurship and also investment. There's a program by Rodney Sampson called OHUB, where they just most recently had like 1,000 HBCU students go to South by Southwest Technology Conference. And so, the ball is rolling, right? The doors are starting to open wider, and but we do need the students to come on in, right? Don't be shy. And I know HBCUs are not shy, so y'all need to come on through and let's do the homecoming let's do the homecoming like we know how to do it.
Hey, Preston, real quick. I don't think we've talked about this. So we backed Rodney in his Series A. That was Mercury's first Black founder-led investment. And I don't know if you guys have seen. Did you guys see the one of the most recent Hennessy ads where Nas pens the letter to his daughter? So it's profiling Rodney and 4 other Black entrepreneurs in that ad. Right? It's unbelievable. But it was so difficult for Rodney to raise that first round. That was really the first deal that kind of opened our eyes to kind of the systematic issue out there with great tech, even great tech, right? And Rodney's amazing, having difficulties. And so anyway, I'm glad you brought that up. The one thing we're trying to do on the HBCU front is, Ashley and my partner Heath and I were talking about this today. We talk a lot about entrepreneurs, but not everyone can be an entrepreneur, right? If you talk about jobs, how do you open the door, right, to all the underestimated out there to actually get a job working at these innovative tech companies, get a job at working at these next generation food and beverage companies, right, that are venture backed? And, how do we open up the door, not just to get a venture capital fellowship or to work at a DivInc accelerator, but how do you open up those doors at HBCUs to go directly to those companies, right, at the right time? Because everyone risk tastes different to everybody, right? Everyone comes from different backgrounds. They've got different financial commitments. And, I think, too, it is almost a matrix that's needed to help make those guidance and those decisions and tell people when to make the leap and not. And I think that's another challenge we got to figure out, because it's tough, like you said, right now. But I think more and more groups like DivInc, they'll have a big enough platform and a big enough portfolio to be able to really make some change, and then other people will comport right? I think that's the other thing about corporates, right? Ashley, we were talking about, from a corporate perspective, what's one of their greatest influences. Well, to Stephen and Yvette, it's not just what your groups are doing, it's that you're challenging others to do it themselves, right? Because they see you do it, they see you comporting, you have so much influence through your brands in the community. And that's something I think that hopefully will continue.
Yeah,
Blair, I don't know how much you've seen in your portfolio, but when people think of technology and technology entrepreneurship, people generally think about, oh, I have to be the next Facebook, I have to be the next Google. But I think probably, again, in the past few years, it's a recent, I think, a recent trend. People are starting to see that there can be technology innovation around social good. And so as a matter of fact, Verizon, we are about to kick off our social impact accelerator where we're focusing on different cohorts. And as a matter of fact, we call it a Forward for Good. And matter of fact, little commercial break, Forward for Good, our applications are out now. And the applications to join our accelerator and our first cohort is focusing on climate change. And so for entrepreneurs who are interested in climate change, we want to make sure that those entrepreneurs get exposed to leading edge technology, get exposed to funders. And so nice. I'd be interested to see how much of your portfolio or just how much of your industry has started to recognize that there is, there is funding and, there are returns available for social impact ventures. And I think that's becoming a new trend that, again, should help to bring in more inclusivity within entrepreneurship.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And you're probably seeing this as well. But like the VC funds right now are divided. You've got social impact funds, right, who have to pass kind of ESG thresholds for institutional or corporate investors. And then you have generalist funds who may invest in a vertical, but they're kind of generalist. At Mercury, we kind of believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, corporate investors and institutional investors and funds will expect every fund to be a social impact fund, right? So the challenge is, how do you weave social impact? How do you weave inclusivity into the fabric of the organization as a VC? And that is a conversation that I've tried to have with many, many different venture groups, and some get it and others just blank stare, right? But I think, corporations and institutions, pension funds, that's where the power is, right? Like if you want to see change, start changing the rules of how capital is deployed into VC firms, right? Don't just deploy capital for a massive return. Deploy capital and push diversity riders from the corporate LP all the way down to the fund and through. You'll see the game change in 3 years. Absolutely 3 years. And so I think if we remove greed from the equation, to keep capitalism at its foresight, right? I think a lot can happen. So I think, look, Stephen, I think groups are thinking that way. I think it's still challenging in some markets to find enough deals at scale within social impact and ESG broadly. But you're already starting to see the winners. And when there's a winner, the capital flocks to it, right? People want to look good at doing these deals. And I think it's like anything else, right? It's just like the underrepresented founder pool. Once you start getting a little bit of traction, the flywheel should take effect. You know what I mean?
No, this is some great insight. And before I jump into some of the questions that our audience has dropped in here, I wanted to ask each and every one of you, like, what is some takeaways or some advice that you would give our audience that are in academia, they're in corporate. It's just some advice as far as how what they can do to maybe lean in a little bit harder if they have it.
You cut out for just a quick second, and I missed like the most important part of that question. Can you state that last bit one more time? I'm so sorry to ask, but I'm going to be embarrassed when you pass it.
I was going to say, like, is there any advice or takeaways that you would give to our audience as far as some things that they can take away to their to either their university or corporation, just some real minor things that they can do. Well, some brief takeaways.
The best thing that I can offer, and what we've learned in community building, specifically within community, right? So let's talk about that for just a quick second. When JP Morgan, specifically me, when we're talking about community, we are talking about neighborhoods, we are talking about families, and we're talking about people. We're not talking about big C community that includes all different ranges. There's certainly opportunities for us to review that, but for the conversation, for the purposes of this conversation, we're thinking directly about how our philanthropy can impact the residents of Houston, Austin, Dallas, wherever our philanthropy is landing, right? If it's not directly helping our constituents, then we should be making those investments. So that's how I'm defining community. And listen, it's been really tough. The community will hold us accountable. When we don't get something right, they will tell us. And it's hard to hear feedback when we don't get something right, but it also creates moments of vulnerability and trust that we are going to do our best to show up in the most authentic way and really try to be a part of the solution versus perpetuating a bad problem. And in that, as we are thinking about our philanthropy, the plans that we make prior, I would say maybe 5 years before, have not typically involved community voice. So my encouragement here for the audience, on either side, if you are on the philanthropy side, on the academia side, on the institution side, include the community in your plan. The feedback that we have gotten the most is, don't make a plan about us without us, please. And also, we want to help you accomplish your goals. So please tell us what your goals are and we can help you. And that is a very scary place for a financial institution, but it's the risk that we are willing to take, JP Morgan Chase is willing to take, to make sure that we are fully showing up in the way that our values dictate that we show up. And if you are on the non-institutional side and you are bringing truth to power, please continue. I cannot tell you enough how much community influence there is over large decisions like what JP Morgan Chase is trying to do in community, because we don't want to be tone deaf. We don't want to get it right. And the only way we're going to do that is by listening to you. And if you don't share that perspective, we'll never know.
So Yvette, that's my favorite line of this event. Don't make a plan about us without us. I love that, and I certainly take that same posture into the community work that we do, and we say that society is a stakeholder at Verizon. Society is a stakeholder in our, and so society is made up of a collection of communities, and there are certain communities, kind of going back to the to why we're here, that have faced inequity and are still facing inequity. And so how do we then build equity in those communities? Well, if you're on the corporate side, and I have seen the same trend that Blair has seen, whereas investors, even Wall Street, is looking at, well, what are your ESG commitments now? So how are you showing up in a responsible way, ecologically, socially? What is your governance structure? And so I think now is the time to continue to push those issues. If you are on the corporate side, it's not the time to be timid and say, well, I don't know, that might not fly. No, now there's been plenty of external impetus put on us. And so I love to see how Chase has continued to push the envelope in. Like, this isn't like Chase's first, because I'm a Chase account holder, and Chase, they're one of our, they're very active in our market. And so I've done some community stuff with them. They've continued to push the envelope. This isn't their first big commitment. And so we need other institutions to leverage their full breadth of resources around this issue of equity in communities. So that's on the institutional side. You cannot, now, if you're afraid to push and you can't push equity in this environment, this is about as ripe as it's been, I think, in a long time anyway. If you're on you mentioned educational institutions, I think now is the time to really talk about entrepreneurship. That was kind of a boutique topic. Back when I was in school, that was like, oh, that's kind of cool, entrepreneurship. But no, we need to go get a job working for somewhere else. Well, now I think there are so many opportunities, and Blair talked about how the market and when people start recognizing there's a market, then funding starts flowing there. And I think people are starting to recognize that entrepreneurship is a viable career path. It's not just something that only certain people can do once they've made a certain amount of money. And so teaching entrepreneurship and the tools of entrepreneurship from the educational institution side, I think will be very important. And then just to echo what Yvette said, as everyone getting back to Citizen Verizon, as citizens, we all have a right and a responsibility to push society forward together, as we like to say at Verizon. And so continue to push for equity, continue to call for justice. And because that's how these topics, that's how you continue the momentum. And that's how, once enough momentum is created, the other forces and other institutions, I think, will follow.
Yeah, Ash, I mean, this has been great. I'm just sitting here listening, learning, like soaking it up like a sponge, right? I think the only thing I can add is any organization has to hold themselves accountable and has to hold their partners accountable, right? And the way we're starting to do that at Mercury is not just saying, hey, we've opened the aperture for deal flow, we're putting diversity riders in, we're doing these different things, is we got to track it with data. And we have to challenge our entrepreneurs to sit down once a year and track their own work with data. And you got to sit down, and you got to review it. And you got to look at cohorts. You got to do cohort analysis. You got to say, okay, this isn't working. Let's tune it up. Let's tune it down, right? Rather than just spreading peanut butter, across the bread. Like, you have to look at the data. You got to step back. There's been some great questions that have popped up saying, hey, there's so many great strides that are happening, but what's going to be the biggest challenge we'll face over the next 3 years to keep this momentum going, right? Because there's so much capital looking to solve this problem right now. You got to back it up with data and not be afraid when you're missing the mark, and talk about it and say, all right, let's regroup. Let's do it again, right? I mean, take our partnership with you guys, right? We got to sit down every quarter and say, are you doing what you guys need to be doing? Are we doing what we need to be doing? If not, let's retrofit, right? Maybe Div Inc. shouldn't be in the middle of the city, right? Maybe it should be down in Sugar Land. Maybe it should be in Missouri City. Maybe we need to go where those entrepreneurs are, but we have no idea right now, right? But man, just data. And again, we drive data all the time in making our decisions, but I think we can be really proactive in solving some of these problems, at least in the short term, so that we can do better.
Great. Preston, before I jump into the some of the questions, did you want to add anything real quick? Oh.
Yeah. Okay, now we're good. Just very quickly, for me, I'm hoping that the next sort of phase of this collaboration, and I think we kind of, touched on it, is really having corporations and foundations collaborate together to support, particular initiatives where missions are aligned. How do multiple corporations, foundations, city government, universities come together and support various different initiatives within, right? And as a result of that, because of that collaboration, you can't slow down you really can't slow down the momentum if multiple entities are basically pushing forward to try to make a difference in the community, right? And so whether, it's VCs, corporations, universities, all coming together, putting money behind it and saying, we're bucketizing money for this, we're bucketizing money for that. It's the will of the community, right? It's the will of the people, right? And the employees are from the community, so on and so forth. So I kind of hope, and my kind of big vision is that, some of that happens, in the future, because, entrepreneurship, corporations, in a nutshell, drive the community. I mean, drive the economy, right? I mean, small businesses become big businesses, and small businesses make up 99% of job creation up in here, right? So I think right now the voice and the will of the people are driving the momentum, and that it doesn't go away anytime soon because of that. Because of, I think people are now smarter. They're more they've been exposed, and now as a result of that, they're more empathetic with the understanding that they have about what other people are going through in trying to make society that much better. So for me, we all need to keep pushing, right? And we can't stop. We can't let up just because we got a little bit of goodness, right? Because that sticks with me, because there were reports that came out last year or the year before that said things are not that much better than they were 50 years ago, right? So that basically meant that, everything that my parents and my grandparents fought for 50 years ago, things are not that much better now than they were when they were. And I'll be damned if the same report comes out 50 years from now and my kids have to read that report and say, all that work that my dad and, all of us did 50 years ago didn't amount to much. I'll be damned if that happens. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're obligated to push that needle, and we have an opportunity to make that go. So that's where I'm feeling.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, so I want to jump in real quick to a couple of questions. So Stephanie Coleman asked, public education biases challenge the entrepreneurship pipeline. Is there an inclusive goal to nurture historically underserved students, especially the historic Third Ward near the Ion? So anyone want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, maybe me, since I'm closest to the Ion. Let's put it that way. So, well, look, I think the fact that Div Inc. is going to be at the Ion, another project we're working on that we'll announce in a couple of months that's super exciting, is going to be based at the Ion. Mercury isn't based at the Ion. We're going to get an office at the Ion just so we can be around the Ion. And I think what you see is Rice University and Rice Management Company, they are backing these programs because they want to be a bridge to the Third Ward. I think I've had many discussions with them that they get that it's about jobs, right? They understand that they need the community involvement. The community needs to be able to invest in some of this activity as well. And, Keith and his Urban Capital Network are working on that, putting potential investment programs together for that. So when it comes to the public education bias, again, I don't know if I can speak to that. But what I can speak to is that us and Div Inc. and others are going to work to build that bridge for job growth, right? Because I do think it's less about identifying the entrepreneur and it's more about providing the bridge to the entrepreneur, right? You give the entrepreneur the resources they need, they can then go out and hire 20 to 50 people. It's that 20 to 50 people that's going to make the difference. And so we're going to work on that. I can't even begin to say what the answer is, but I know that aggregating these resources, like Stephen talked about, like they're doing good work up at 1871, that's what we're going to do at the Ion, all of us together, locking arms, and that's a start.
Answering the question a little differently, at least with a different lens, I know that the Houston mayor has the Complete Communities initiative, and Third Ward is certainly a part of those 10 neighborhoods, and many resources, including education, but kind of thinking about the economic mobility levers for that neighborhood, for the 10 neighborhoods, I know will be continuing to be a focus for the city. So hopefully we see some improvements there from a systems level from our local government. The other part that I'll say is, financial management, financial education, and entrepreneurship go hand in hand. When you are oftentimes starting a business, folks don't have the personal capital or the personal wealth to differentiate those two, right? So the business finances are directly correlated to the family finances, and that puts people in a very precarious position. And I mean, so it just does, right or wrong. What we're hoping to do is at an earlier age, in K through 12 education is really revisit what financial education looks like. Not financial literacy, not how to cut a check, but really helping young students understand the value, not necessarily the value of a dollar, but the value of saving, the value of thinking about how you're going to manage finances and going through some exercises. So in the 5th ward, which is a little bit further out from the 3rd ward, but in the 5th ward, we've got a community branch manager. Her name is Kim Evans, and she is specifically looking at financial education, not only for adults, but also for our youth. And Chase has created a curriculum specifically for our youth to start thinking about what healthy financial habits look like, because that education is mostly absent. And folks don't like talking about money, and we should be real comfortable talking about money these days.
Very true, very true. Hey, so I want to just ask you guys real quick, just rapid fire. I'm looking at the time; we only have a couple of minutes left, and so just real quick, what do you think a win looks like in terms of a corporate partner? And anyone can go first. I just want to throw that last little question out, just so feel free to, anyone can jump in.
One definition I have of a corporate win is when you can help communities authentically in a way that's aligned with your business strategy. So you're not doing things that are just one-offs or things that are kind of nice to do, but you can figure out an authentic way to add true value. So not just about press releases, although media attention is good and can bring some other things, but when you can find an authentic way to enhance and add value to communities that aligns with your business strategy, then I think you found a good method for partnership.
I would say the short answer is, for us, is the organization's success is our success, right? So if Div Inc. is accomplishing its goals and serving the constituents in which they want to serve, and we are finding that startups are getting access to VCs and are getting funded and all these kinds of things, that is a win for us. That is a dollar invested coming back to us fivefold. That's great.
Yeah, mine's kind of a hybrid. I mean, we always talk about when community service is woven into your fabric of what you do, right? It's almost business service, then it's a win, right? And then you have a good partnership, and it's going to renew, right? So.
Exactly. Awesome. Preston, final words.
Like I said, I'm proud and blessed to have, all of these folks as partners and as friends. And I encourage, those who are in attendance, to lean in. Lean in. If you're an entrepreneur, as if you're a potential mentor, corporate executive, corporate partner, VC fund, lean in with us, right? You may not know exactly what it is that you want to do, but come engage, come see what's going on, come understand better, come support in any way that you can. And individuals, entrepreneurs, aspiring folks, lean in, come on in, and let's be part of the community, because it's only, again, together we can all do this, right? And together we can help each other, right? And so we welcome that opportunity. Please come on in. Please knock on the door. Please come talk to us, and let's see what we can do together and make a difference in our communities. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. And on that note, we thank everyone for attending tonight. And just so thankful for the support. You can reach out to any one of us. Feel free. We're all on LinkedIn, obviously. But yeah, thank you again. Hopefully everyone was able to walk away with some great insight, valuable information, and reach out. And we appreciate everyone's time. All right. Have a good evening.